now that we've dived into the concept of sufficiency, let's dive into the challenges and opportunities surrounding sufficiency through the eyes of experts across the corporate, academia, and foundation sectors. Is achieving sufficiency realistic and desirable in all these sectors? And if not, what risks might we face as a result? To enrich this discussion, please also welcome on stage André Hoffmann, co-founder of Intent and vice chairman of Roche, Aurore, the co-director of Energy Solutions at Romande Energie, and Gustave, strategic product partnerships at Google. All right. So now that we have dived into the concept, Yamina, I want to know very, very briefly how relevant is the term of sufficiency in your respective sectors as well. Let's start with Aurore, ladies first. Since you work at the Romande Energie, in a few words, how do you define sufficiency in the energy sector and why is it so important for the future?
So I would go back to what Yamina was saying. It is basically the energy that you don't consume, the one you avoid. It's the cheapest one on the planet, right? It's not only important, I think it's mandatory. From a utility perspective, we always look at the supply and the demand and how we can basically balance that equation. If I take the Swiss example, we know that the electric consumption is going to go through the roof with the massive electrification of our society. And yes, we do have a very ambitious development strategy in renewable energies, but we don't know if it's going to be enough, right? So we need all the levers that we can use to reduce the consumption and balance that equation, and sufficiency is one of them.
All right. Now, I want to go with André. Can you briefly pinpoint 3 ways in which sufficiency plays a role in your areas of work?
Well, thank you very much for the question. First, I would like to say that I am absolutely very excited not only to be here, but to be able to talk about sufficiency, la sobriété. For me, an absolutely crucial way of our responsibility as humanity towards the planet and the planetary boundaries. Now, we can decline it to the individual industries, but what really is important is to realize that everything, and thank you, Amina, for surrounding this, everything we do use on top of what's needed is something we take away from others, because we live into a planetary boundaries, because we live into a planet. And so when our responsibility at Roche, I am the vice chair of Hoffmann La Roche, when we do something at Roche, our life, our purpose is to save patients, is to try to do today what the patient needs next. The first thing we have to do is to realize that as companies, we cannot ignore the fact that we have an impact on the planet, and that its impact on the planet has to be based on the most sufficient way of resources. And so how do we do that? I would translate that into a business model. Well, we need to make sure that we achieve our purpose while using as little resources as possible. How can we do that if we do not first make that commitment? And so it really starts with management's realization that the purpose of the company is not just to make profits, it's not just to make money. The purpose of the company is to serve whatever purpose it has decided and to contribute to society. Once you take this very decision, there is a sort of common sense coming in, and I would like to use the English expression commons sense, not just common sense, but commons, with the use of the global commons, to bring us towards the most optimal use of resources, of energy, of talent, of know-how. And I think that's what we are really talking about here. And it's not specific to the pharmaceutical industry. It's easier in the pharmaceutical industry because we do move less resources. You know, we do small volumes of high-value products. And so optimizing these processes comes as more natural management phenomenon. But it is for all of us to think about this. How do we respect not only the impact we're having on the natural resources, but also on the social and the human?
Excellent. Now, Gustave, I want to know why sufficiency can be so relevant for tech giants, you who work in Google.
So yeah, first, again, thank you for having me, and thank you for the presentation as well. Just to, I'll try to steer my answer to what you just said, because this was very informative as well. But just generally speaking, so it's a bit like coding in the end. For us, the better we design the products that we run, the less energy we consume. And so there's been a lot of research, not only at Google, but across the industry, within alliance and partnerships, across how do we avoid using, for example, plastics in packaging, how do we optimize for energy, how do we avoid using carbon-intensive energy, and try to divert all the programming to data centers that are actually running on green grid, etc., etc. So there's been a lot of research and this has been done across the industry. It hasn't been done only by Google. The intent is there, and it's also true, I think, to what you just said, and to avoid questions that will be coming our way later on, that in practice, there's still a way to go, and it's something that has to be done at a collective level, and so we're not there yet.
Excellent. Now, coming back to Aurore, your main background is in solar energy, which is an outstanding use of renewables. And here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that the amount of sunlight that hits the Earth in just 1 hour is enough to power the electricity of the entire world for a year? And that is just by the, well, correct me if I'm wrong. So, what challenges and opportunities for integrating energy sufficiency into larger systems like businesses and governments can set an example for people at home?
I wanna circle back to what Mr. Hoffmann was saying and focus on the 3 Ps, as we know them: people, planet, and profit. So basically, how to do well by doing good and doing right, Yamina. So this is one thing, but unfortunately, I think that if we really want to foster sufficiency and set an example, we do need innovative policies, such as taxation on natural resources, a personal carbon footprint allowance, or incentive for sufficiency behavior, to mention a few of them.
All right. And now, André, sufficiency doesn't mean a halt in innovation, but rather rethinking how we innovate. You're someone who wears many hats. You have experience heading financial initiatives, biodiversity projects. You are the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum, and of course, currently you are the vice chairman of Roche. So, can innovation and sufficiency truly coexist? And if so, how do you see multinationals balancing the two?
That's a very wide question. I hope the question from the audience are going to be more specific, because we can put an awful lot of things inside that. Yes, of course, we come back to the essence of business. Business is about creating value, and so we have defined it over the years. In particular, in acceleration in the last 100 years, we have defined it into monetary value. But that's not what it is. What the company should really do is to contribute to something that participates to the human capital, us. Are we happy? Are we at a level of well-being that will help us to continue in life? Number 2, the social capital. Why are we all here together today? There must be a reason. What brings us together? What do we owe to each other? Who are we in relationship to our neighbor? And the natural capital, which are the planet. Now, I'm really insisting on this notion that the planetary boundaries are not just nature and the planet. Planetary boundaries is us first. It's social capital, human capital, and then the planet. And I think that's important to understand the interaction between the two. And in fact, not just the interaction, but the interdependencies. Without a healthy planet, there's no healthy humanity. And I think we're noticing that more and more. So I will go as far as say that corporate practice based on short-term profit maximization, which is the current thing they teach you at school, is destroying the planet. And we can only reverse that if we start dealing in a different way, in particular, in a way which will regenerate and which will eliminate waste. And that, for me, has a lot to do with the concept of sobriety, of sufficiency. How can we continue to create the value? We absolutely need to create a sustainable prosperity that will allow us to continue to thrive on the planet. If thriving we do, which is another question. And if we want to do that properly, how can we do that within the conditions we have given ourselves?
Yamina has a couple words.
I can see she was really... That's
No,
around the panel.
Actually, there will be no business in planet at 3 degrees. There will be, because with the current policies, what people do not realize is that with the current policies, we are heading towards more than 3 degrees on average of global warming by the end of the century compared to the pre-industrial era. And more than 3 degrees, it is likely that this is going to happen earlier than the end of the century. You have to keep in mind that the Paris Agreement is aiming at 1.5 degree by the end of the century of global warming. And with the current policies, we are heading towards double of this. In this context, there will be, the planet will no longer be livable for us, so there will be no business. So I don't see any other option than changing completely what we have been doing to align what we must be doing. Whatever we are doing today, we must align it with the remaining carbon budget and the capacity of the planet to keep life for us going. Because the planet, I hear very often climate activists saying, save the planet. Planet does not care about us. It will continue without us. Actually, we need to save humanity from humanity.
So how do you,
Can I just quickly add a data point? Secretary General Guterres at the CBD conference in Cali, in Colombia, 2 days ago, gave us the number, 3.1 degrees warming if we stay on the current trends. So that's not just science fiction that a couple of scientists this is the facts provided by the ICCC at Cali during the CBD conference, in the mouth of the Secretary General of the United Nations. The highest possible level we can think of, 3.1 degrees by 2030.
On that note, and because many people in the audience have already, shown interest in this question, so Yamina, from a policy and research standpoint, what action should governments and international bodies prioritize to promote sufficiency, and what kind of systematic change is required? And let's try to be specific.
Yeah, so considering sufficiency in the sustainability policy package, as I mentioned earlier, France is the only OECD country where sufficiency is embedded, is part of the energy transition law since 2015. However, in practice, I checked, we have plenty of decrees that goes against sufficiency. And in all other OECD countries, the concept of sufficiency does not exist. They don't know what's that. And at the EU level, in the case for us, our climate and our environmental policies are European policies. There is no EU binding instrument where sufficiency appears. It does not exist. So what we are doing today, this is why we established the World Sufficiency Lab, and we should have a hub very soon in Brussels to provide scientific evidence what sufficiency brings to us as EU citizens. This is one thing. The other thing that did really surprise me, because when I went to the IPCC with the idea of introducing the sufficiency concept there, I did this because I failed in doing this at the EU level. That's why I thought that I need to go to something above the EU, and the UN was the right thing. So my surprise was to realize that for many scientists, for most of them, the sufficiency concept was unknown. Because in the IPCC, I am from climate mitigation policies expertise. In the climate mitigation expertise, you have people with background like mine, engineers, economists, etc. And sufficiency, it's not something we have been trained on. So for example, all what we call today the IPCC scenarios for the 1.5 degree target, none of them, I checked them, none of them is sufficiency driven. And actually, this is what gives me hope. Why? Because we did estimate with my colleagues in peer-reviewed paper, we did estimate the sufficiency potential. And the sufficiency potential, actually, we could reduce by 2050 our emissions by up to 50% emission reduction by 2050 compared to our emissions in 2019 if sufficiency would be considered. The planet is in such state that we cannot afford, we don't have the luxury to afford to not capture this potential, because it's our responsibility to leave a livable planet, to keep the planet livable for our kids. What I don't know is how to accelerate that, by which process we could accelerate this. This is something that we don't have the answer in the scientific literature, and I do think intuitively that this is something we need to build with citizens, to put pressure on policymakers to move towards truly sustainable policies that cannot afford to not have sufficiency included.
Now, I want to move to Gustave and address the tech factor. We're witnessing a very rapid expansion of the internet and tech adoptions in India and also in Africa. According to the International Telecommunication Union, internet users in Africa have more than doubled in the past decade. In India, we're expecting more than 1 billion active users by 2026. And that is about 30% more of what we're seeing today. As the demand for energy, for internet increases, the demand for energy also increases in parallel. So what will the main obstacles be when it comes to implementing sufficiency?
So I think that's a great question, and as a good panelist, I will answer with another question. No, but just generally speaking, I think so. The numbers are interesting, and just to put things into perspective, so at the moment, so in 2030, 42% of people under 25 will be in sub-Saharan Africa. And at the moment, only 40% of Africa, so the penetration rate of mobile phones across Africa is only 40% at the moment. As a comparison, it's 95%, I think, here in Europe. There's no reason why the trend should be different in these countries. And so I think I'd just like to highlight a paradox, which is the next billion users will come from places like Africa and India. But in many ways, these countries didn't wait to innovate, and I think you mentioned it, but the way innovation came about in these markets was mainly resource constraint. So if you take the total fleet of phones across Africa, for example, it's in majority feature phones, so not smartphones, but just the phones like your old Nokia. And there's a lot of, in terms of energy efficiency, materials, etc., it's a lot less than smartphones. And there's a lot of businesses that have been created around these feature phones. So, for example, if you want to access content, instead of having videos, etc., you work with local telecom operators. You enter a number, and then you have access to a menu. And this is done, for example, for farmers to access weather forecasts, for students to access education content, etc., etc., for entrepreneurs to be able to transact with customers, etc. So this is changing. 2023 was the first year where there was more smartphones sold or shipped to Africa than feature phones. So things are changing. But the smartphones that you see being sold in Africa are not the same that we have here. For many,
do they have Google Maps? I think that is the question.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So and also, like, do you actually need Google Maps? It comes back to what do you actually need and what do you need to avoid. So we actually the reason I was hired initially at Google was actually to make maps more relevant in Africa. And one of the baseline hypothesis was we don't actually have the data. Transportation here in Switzerland, you have all the data, you know where the stop is, the schedule is, etc. But over there, you don't. It's informal transportation, and so how do you actually map it and make it relevant in a way that people can access it? And so the question around resource constraints. So it's true for the price of devices, the price of data, access to energy. Can you recharge your phone, etc. So all these are constraints on how people can access information. This is changing. And so it's a real paradox. The next billion users will come from there. The way the phone industry and the phone fleet will change, but will change in the way that we have in Europe, maybe not.
Okay, we'll get back to that because I know that the audience are left with more questions now. So, Aurore, another big question that people are asking in our platform is, how can we make sufficiency desirable then?
I mean, I want to answer as like Gustave. I'm a young parent, so it's basically for me the definition of happiness and how you change the mindset and how we're gonna teach our kids to be happy without flying to the Maldives for a vacation. You know, teaching them basically to be just as happy as we were, but maybe eating a bit differently, traveling differently, but it doesn't mean that it has to be worse. So yeah, that's it.
Right. Anything you want to add upon that, André?
Thank you. I think a lot of the overconsumption on the planet is inadvertent. It's not intended. It's because the system is focusing on what is profitable rather than what is impactful. The real issue that we are having is that we don't have a proper metric to understand the consequences of what we are doing. Our consumption act has consequences on the social, on the human, and on the natural capital. And as long as we don't agree collectively on the metric, which allows us to really put a price, and I advertedly say price because I think this will have to go for the financial system. If we cannot actually actively put a price onto what it is we are consuming, we are not going to be able to really take the right decision. What we need is a decision tool which really takes into account the whole chain of effects of each consumption or each act. It doesn't even have to be consumption. And this is not just limited to companies, it's limited to all interaction of humanity. So if we don't understand the interdependency on the free capitals on a really real basis at a concrete moment of the day, we are just going to continue to take the wrong decisions.
So what kind of mindset shift is really necessary to make that shift, André? What exactly do we need to change that mindset?
I think we've talked about this several times during this morning. Sufficiency is a good way to demonstrate that you can achieve at least as much satisfaction while taking less resources, while using less time, less energy, less know-how, and of course less money. And I think that is what we need to enshrine as a behavior. We need to do enough, but not too much. The target is the center. The target is not over or below. And if you want to really embed this into our way of acting, we need to be able to measure it. You only manage what you measure.
And how can we measure that? Do you feel that we should measure it everywhere, not only in where you work, but also when you walk into a supermarket and have maybe a computer and say, this is our carbon footprint, or thanks to you, this is how much we've saved, something like that?
Well, it's my fault. I've been bringing it back to consumption. It's not only about consumption. It's about everything we do in life. We only look at the materiality. We have defined happiness as being able to buy the latest car and the latest bag, and that's obviously not what happiness is. Happiness is being able. I mean, the Maslow pyramid. Happiness is to be able to serve. It's to be able to serve society. It's to be able to be yourself. It's to be able to actually live according to your own values. Today, we cannot do that because these values are not defined in a proper way. You know, I know that my daily life is continuing to entertain the status quo, which is destroying the planet. So what do? Well, either I wake up in the morning and when I shave in front of the mirror, I give myself targets how I can change that, or I continue to stay in the system because it's easier. You know, moving the status quo is so complicated. You need to be innovative. Oh my God! You know, you need to start thinking about new ways of doing it. And we all inherently don't want to change. And that's very much what Yamina was saying before. You know, as long as we don't take into account the true allocation of resources, we are not going to bring that change about. You know, our company does a lot of work in schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, you know, you have a brain. The brain is divided in two. I'm simplifying. The part that knows and the part that does. And how do we connect the two? We know we are going towards the precipice and we don't do anything. What is that? It's schizophrenia. It's a pathology. You need a doctor. You probably need a molecule as well, but we haven't found that one yet. But you know, a sufficiency doctor. And that's really what we're talking about. And we've said that in very many different ways, shapes, or forms all morning. But if we really do want to get to this notion of sustainable prosperity, we're going to have to inhale this notion of doing what is needed.
All right, we are running out of time, so Yamina, really quickly, since you're an advocate in the world of education, what are we not teaching today that could be solving some of the sufficiency challenges of tomorrow?
Oh, what we are teaching is completely wrong. We must unlearn, and the challenge is that those who teach, like myself, must first unlearn, and then to learn something new, and then to digest it and teach it.
Is there one thing that you're seeing in schools, that you're seeing in universities, that, hey, this is the one thing that you should be teaching?
The second law of thermodynamics in business schools.
Okay. Good to know. All right, last question for everyone here. In one sentence, what's one concrete action you'd like to see implemented within the next 5 years to truly move sufficiency forward? Let's start with Gustave.
In what? So I think, I join you. I think it's as you said, it's a paradigm shift that is needed. And at the end of the day, it's all about people. I mean, tech is all about people. People collect, people design tech, people use tech, people analyze the behaviors of tech. So it's all about people. I agree with what you need to teach in business schools. I think there's already a few programs that are doing it. E4S is one, I guess, and some others as well across the world. Some programs that I'd just like to highlight, 3. Benoit from the Resilience Institute, they're doing a lot of work to help people reconnect with themselves, reconnect with nature, and work in a state of what they call flow. So that's really important, and I think this can help in this regard. Second is Bertrand and Tech for Regeneration, helping entrepreneurs better understand regenerative principles. I think this is extremely key and may also help in changing the paradigm. And Julian, who's going to do a masterclass later on with the CEC Switzerland, helping companies better understand exactly what you mentioned, how the planet works and how their companies can work within the planetary boundaries.
All right. Aurore, the big challenge, in one sentence, what's one concrete action that you'd like to see moving forward within the next 5 years?
Personal empowerment, and for that you need to put a price, you need to measure, but you need to personally be able to monitor your own footprint, basically.
So the same question.
Exactly.
Well, I think really we need 3 things we need to happen rather quickly. One is this notion of measuring impact. And again, I'm quoting the CBD conference in Colombia at the moment. There are a number of different standards which are being promoted. The one I'm personally pushing is TNFD, the Nature Financial Disclosure, where we are trying to get inscribed into a way for companies to report on their impact on nature. This is the work done by the Capitals Coalition, which I chair, where we have brought together the 3 capitals, the social, the human, and the natural, and where we are trying to bring together a protocol which allows endeavors across the planet. And I'm trying always to go away from corporations, not just business, endeavors in general, to be able to measure the impact better and to make decisions based on it. The second
So if you have to mention one, the most important one, this is a challenge.
You mentioned 3. Okay. If I had to mention one, I have a bit of a background in nature. I think, we've been focusing far too much on climate and on CO2. I think what's important is to do something about nature. And if we want to do that, we need to put a price on nature. We need to put nature onto the balance sheet. And not just at corporate level, but at societal level. And that's what the CBD conference is about. And I hope we will get to some sort of consensus which will allow us to go further in that field.
Now, where would you start, Yamina? One thing.
Re-becoming citizens.
Okay.
Because today we are consumers, and this is where we lost everything. We need to re-become citizens.
To re-become citizens. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. It's been such an invigorating discussion.